We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
Marilyn Monroe by Vernon Scott. Performed by Joanna Cassidy.
It was on the morning of August 5th, 1962, when Dr. Ralph Greenson, Marilyn Monroe's psychiatrist, broke the actress's bedroom window with a fireplace poker given to him by her housekeeper, Eunice Murray. With difficulty, Greenson climbed through the window and rushed to Marilyn, lying nude on her rumpled queen-size bed, a white telephone clutched in her hand. The physician felt for the actress's pulse and was relieved to find a feeble beat. He lifted her right eyelid. The iris was unusually dilated. Beside the bed, Greenson found 2 empty vials. One had contained Nebutol and the other chloral hydrate. Greenson moved Marilyn from her prone position to a supine one, resting her head on a pillow and noting her pallid skin was clammy and cool. He speculated on how close she was to death. He unlocked the bedroom door, allowing Eunice Murray into the room before replacing the telephone on its cradle. "It's a good thing you called, Mrs. Murray," the graying, bearded psychiatrist said in his authoritative Teutonic accent. "She's still alive. Warm some water, and quickly." Greenson dialed Dr. Hyman Engelberg. They had consulted many times on their mutual patient. The clock on Marilyn's bedside table read 3:40 a.m. Warm, clawing air swept into the room through the broken window as Greenson waited for Engelberg to answer the telephone. When he heard Engelberg's voice, Greenson said, "Hyman, it's Ralph Greenson. I'm with Marilyn. You better get here quickly. She's done it again." "How bad is she?" "Comatose. She apparently overdosed on prescribed medication. There are a couple of empty bottles here by the bed." "I don't recall renewing her prescription. Any other signs of drugs?" "No, not that I can see, but I haven't looked around thoroughly." Engelberg was silent for a moment. "See if you can bring her around. Stimulate her if you can. Try to get an emetic into her, a purge of some sort. And you'd better call a private ambulance company just in case. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Greenson replaced the instrument, then picked it up and called the Goodhue ambulance service. He proceeded to search Marilyn's bedroom with care. Her clothes, blue jeans, a white silk blouse, cotton brassiere, and white bikini panties were tossed in a jumble near the door. Cosmetics were strewn messily around a vanity that was against a wall near the entrance to her bathroom. A motion picture script was thrown carelessly on the floor, its pages splayed. There was a jagged rip where a page had been torn from the rest of the manuscript. Greenson's eyes probed the disorder until he found the missing page lying on the carpet on the far side of the actress's bed. He bent to pick it up, straightening with some surprise. In Marilyn's curious, almost illegible hand was scribbled, "Bobby, you had no right to walk out on me tonight. You promised. I believed you. You're using me like Jack did. I can't take any more of you Kennedys. This is the last time. But I love you. I still love you. M." Greenson pocketed the note. He was sure the message was addressed to Robert Kennedy, and he knew the inflammatory consequences its contents would ignite if it were made public. With John F. Kennedy in the White House, the scandal would be incalculable. During recent months in therapy, Marilyn had confided her love affair with Bobby Kennedy as well as her fling with the president. She wept, expressing fears that the celebrated brothers had passed her back and forth like a prostitute while she had given both men her love as well as her body. On her last visit to his office, Marilyn told Greenson that Bobby had seriously discussed leaving his wife Ethel to marry her. The psychiatrist decided against showing the note to Engelberg. He slapped Marilyn's face sharply on each cheek. She failed to respond to the blows except to emit a barely perceptible groan. Greenson hurried into the bathroom, which was in greater disarray than the bedroom. Drugs, cosmetics, underwear, towels, and toilet articles littered the pink and white room, spilling into the bathtub and over the marble counters. Greenson located a bottle of Ipecac in the medicine cabinet. He diluted a capful in a glass of water and returned to Marilyn. The psychiatrist lifted her head and poured the liquid between her lips. Some of the mixture dribbled from the sides of her mouth, trickled down her chin, and fell on her chest, running down her large, flattened breasts. Greenson set down the glass, retrieved a towel, and dried off his patient. He then pulled the sheet up under her chin, noting that Marilyn's skin was almost as white as the sheet itself. The telephone rang, startling the doctor. Thinking perhaps it was Engelberg, he lifted the receiver. A distraught English-accented voice demanded, "Who is this?" Greenson replied, "May I ask who's calling? Is this the Monroe residence?" "Yes, it is. This is Dr. Ralph Greenson." "Well, the phone's been busy for hours. Is Marilyn okay, or what?" "It's almost 4 o'clock in the morning. Who is calling, please?" Greenson said. "Hello, doctor. It's Peter Lawford. We've met. I talked to Marilyn about midnight, and she was in pretty rough shape. Is she okay now?" Greenson was relieved it was Lawford. Marilyn had told him the actor was her principal contact with Robert Kennedy, as he had been in her relationship with the president. "She's very ill. Dr. Engelberg is on his way here. Is she going to make it?" "I don't know, Peter." "Well, has she said anything?" "No." Did she leave any messages or anything?" "Yes, a note." "What does it say?" Greenson hesitated. He told himself the note constituted a confidence between patient and doctor. "I'm not certain Marilyn would want me to divulge its contents," Greenson said. "I will wait until she recovers and then return it to her." "Well, just one question, doctor. Is it addressed to anyone specifically? To me, for instance?" "No, not to you, Peter. But yes, it is a note to someone of prominence." Lawford was silent, thinking. Earlier he had driven Bobby Kennedy from Marilyn's Brentwood home to catch a private Learjet at an almost deserted Cloverfield, Santa Monica small airport. The plane would have delivered Bobby to his San Francisco destination 2 hours ago. It would be difficult to prove Bobby had interrupted his attendance at the American Bar Association conference that weekend to secretly fly to Los Angeles. After all, he had been accompanied on this trip by his wife and children, although he had left them at a ranch of a friend in Gilroy, California. "Doctor, if I come up there right now, do you suppose you could give me that note?" Greenson didn't hesitate. "I think not." "Well, tell Marilyn if she needs me, I'll be right there," Lawford said. Greenson hung up. Marilyn's face had gained a little color. She was, however, still unconscious when she began to retch. The ipecac was doing its work. The first thing Marilyn saw when she opened her eyes was the white ceiling and its hard, cold aluminum light fixture. Her aching head felt as if it were in a vice. She was unable to move it, but peripherally she could see the glucose IV bottle on its stand to her right and another bottle dripping liquid into a tube on her left. She attempted without success to move her arms, but they were held fast by restraints. Even her legs were immobilized by straps. She could feel a catheter tube pressing into her. Her throat was dry and constricted, and she had a bitter taste in her mouth. "Where am I?" she cried in little more than a whisper. A black nurse in a crisp white uniform hurried from her chair in the closed room. She stood by the side of the bed. Marilyn slid her eyes in the nurse's direction and repeated her question. "You are in Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, Miss Thomas." "Thomas? Get me a telephone," Marilyn ordered. "No, I'm sorry. It's against regulations in the psychiatric wing." "The what?" Marilyn was horrified. "I'll call you, doctor." The nurse disappeared as Marilyn struggled weakly against her bonds. Jesus, the psychiatric floor. Who knows I'm here? What will the papers say? I have to talk to Bobby. Marilyn sank back into a troubled sleep. She was awakened an hour later by Ralph Greenson gently shaking her arm. "Marilyn," he said. "Ralph, what the hell am I doing in a crazy ward? Are you responsible for this?" Marilyn, we're trying to save your life." "Don't give me that just trying to protect the Kennedys like everyone else. I know what you're doing. Please, Marilyn, you've got to pull yourself together. You almost did it this time. Hyman Engelberg barely pulled you through. You'd taken enough drugs to kill a person twice your size. Get me the hell out of here, you now, I mean it." "I can't do that, Marilyn. You are a very sick woman. No one knows you're here except Mrs. Murray, your agent, and your publicity lady. This must not get out to the media. It would be very destructive to you in every way. You'll have to spend a few days here until you regain your strength, then perhaps a month or two in the country someplace to pull yourself together. Get me a telephone." "I'm sorry, Marilyn. I'm going to call the President of the United States. Jack will take my call, and that's what I'm going to do. You can't keep me here against my will. It's against the law." Greenson stroked Marilyn's forehead. She was wan and perspiring, her face strangely bald. Without makeup, her eyebrows disappeared, and she was almost unrecognizable as the world's most photographed woman. It had been more than 48 hours since Greenson had admitted her to the hospital under the name of Beverly Thomas, but it would take at least an additional week for the toxins to leach from her ravaged system. Several days would pass before Marilyn would be well enough to think and behave rationally. The psychiatrist's silence annoyed her. "Am I going to get a telephone or not?" "No." "At least untie my arms." "We must leave them as they are for a time, Marilyn. It's important that you get the nutrients intravenously. You'll have to follow orders this time. It was a very close call." "I want to talk to Peter Lawford. Can he visit me here?" "Later, Marilyn. You are not to see or talk to anyone except your nurses, myself, and Dr. Engelberg." "You've done this to me. You and Jack and Bobby and all the other goddamn men in my life. You'll pay for this. You—" Marilyn, Greenson soothed. "Just for a few days until you're free of all the poison in your system. You're fired. Now get out." Marilyn closed her eyes and sank back into nightmarish sleep. Eunice Murray had put Marilyn's house in sparkling order. There were fresh flowers in every room when the actress returned from Cedars of Lebanon, accompanied by Greenson and Engelberg. For once, the network of hospital tipsters had been frustrated. Her presence in Cedars had gone undiscovered. More than a week had passed in the life of Marilyn Monroe without her whereabouts being known. Pat Newcomb, her publicist, awaited Marilyn at the front door. "You look marvelous," Pat said, embracing her longtime client and personal friend. Marilyn gave the publicist a peck on the cheek. "I'm wrung out, Pat. I've got to get to a telephone." She turned to the doctors as she entered her home. "Thanks, Ralph. Thanks, Hi. I promise I'll be a good girl." Greenson was not amused. "I'll stop by tomorrow." "You okay?" Pat asked. "Well, what do you think? 10 days in the f***ing hospital without a telephone or a visitor?" "Well, I've got good news," Pat said with a false cheerfulness. 20th called last week. There's some interest in reviving Something's Gotta Give. Dean Martin said he was ready to go ahead with it, and fired me. But George Cukor and Harry Brand and the others of the studio think the picture can be salvaged if you're well enough. They didn't know you were so ill, Marilyn. "I can't work now. The doctors say I need to rest. Anyhow, I've got some personal things to take care of at this moment." Pat stopped as Marilyn entered her home. "What do you want me to tell them?" "Nothing. Call me tomorrow." Pat turned reluctantly and walked toward her car, promising to telephone later in the day. Marilyn's blunt, unmanicured finger dialed the familiar number. "You've reached the White House switchboard." "I'm making a personal call to the president," Marilyn announced, her tone far from the breathy little girl voice so familiar to millions. "This is Norma Mortensen," she added. The name was one she and Jack Kennedy had agreed upon almost a year earlier. In the past, she would be switched directly to the president, except on those occasions when he was genuinely unavailable. At those times, she was courteously informed the president would return her call. "One moment, please," the mail operator said. He was off the line for a full minute. When he spoke again, the Secret Service man said, "I'm sorry, the president's office says there's no clearance for anyone by the name of Norma Mortensen." Marilyn knew instantly her access to the President of the United States had been withdrawn forever. She was stunned by the sudden sense of isolation that swept over her, a deflating feeling of loss of power. She depressed the telephone cradle and dialed another Washington, D.C. number. "Mr. Kennedy's office," a voice responded. "May I speak to Mr. Robert Kennedy, please? This is Norma Mortensen." "I'm sorry, Mr. Kennedy is in conference. Do you care to leave a message?" "Well, would you ask him to call me, please? He has my number." "Thank you." Again Marilyn dialed, this time to a Santa Monica Beach number. "Hello," Peter Lawford said. "Peter, it's Marilyn." "Oh, thank God, Marilyn. Where have you been? How are you feeling?" "At Cedars, Peter," Marilyn said in a tired voice. I accidentally overdosed on amphetamines." "God, honey, I'm sorry. Are you going to be okay?" "Yes, don't worry about it. You've got to help me, Peter. I can't get Jack or Bobby on the phone. I know you have their personal numbers." Lawford was silent for a beat, his voice falsely light-hearted. He said, "Well, I don't think that's such an awfully good idea right now, Marilyn. You know they're both involved in all that. Peter, you're stalling. They don't want to talk to me, do they?" "Well, no, that's not it at all, Marilyn. They're just busy." "Bullshit, Peter. Why have they slammed the door in my face?" "Well, we all heard about your, illness, honey. I talked to Ralph Greenson at your house the night you were under the weather, and he said you were in pretty bad shape. So? Well, some of us thought you might have been, on the brink." Marilyn's voice trembled. "You think I tried to commit suicide?" "Ralph said something about a note." "Well, what about it, Peter? Ralph gave it back to you, didn't he? You've destroyed it, haven't you?" Lawford's question held an edge of fear. Well, you can tell Bobby and Jack there isn't any note. They're both perfectly safe in their perfect little marriages with their perfect little wives. And you can tell them both for me to go themselves. Lawford, relieved, said, "Come on, Marilyn, we'll all be getting together again." Too, Peter. I never want to talk to any of you for the rest of my life." It was the last contact Marilyn Monroe would ever have with a member of the Kennedy family. Nor would she mention the Kennedy name again. Not in the shock after Jack's assassination in Dallas. Not when Bobby was cut down during his presidential campaign in Los Angeles 5 years later. Marilyn heeded Greenson's advice. She spent a month with Pat Newcomb, Eunice Murray, and her masseur, Ralph Roberts, in a private rented residence in Maui, Hawaii. The world-famous glamour girl strove religiously to regain her health. Adjusting her sleeping schedule, she cut her intake of Nebutol to virtually nothing. For the first time since her marriage to Arthur Miller, she watched her diet, refusing sweets and liquor. Marilyn allowed her hair to return to its natural brown and wore no makeup. The retreat, entirely hidden from the public eye, reconstituted the actress. "The best thing is isolating myself from the men," she confided to Pat. Marilyn remained out of contact with her former husbands and recent lovers. She managed to convince herself that men had always been the cause of her psychological breakdowns and that she no longer needed to rely on them emotionally. At the end of her Hawaiian rest cure, Marilyn agreed to return to 20th Century Fox Studios to finish Something's Got to Give. Her agents assured the 36-year-old actress that she would never again work in Hollywood unless she fulfilled her contract to the studio and completed the movie. The insurance company would underwrite her health. Marilyn returned to the mainland and faced a carnival-like news conference at Los Angeles International Airport as she stepped off the plane looking better than she had in years. Her hair, platinum again, sparkled in the sunshine. She looked slender, refreshed, and beautiful, and she knew it. At 6 o'clock the following Monday morning, she bathed and toweled off in front of her full-length bathroom mirror. It was to be her first day back at work on Something's Got to Give. She studied her body objectively. There was a clear suggestion of sagging in her breasts and stretch marks at the point of her hips. Turning sideways, Marilyn noted unhappily a thickening in her upper thighs. There were small dimples in her buttocks. She dreaded having to play a nude swimming pool scene later in the picture and felt a slight panic. Marilyn threw open her medicine chest to withdraw a bottle of Benzedrine. Swallowing 2 capsules, she felt the rush almost immediately and knew she would be able to face the cameras again. Something's Got to Give went 2 weeks over schedule and $2 million over budget. Marilyn was chronically late, sometimes not appearing on the set at all. Director George Cukor was frequently forced to eliminate close-ups of his star because her glazed, unfocused eyes would have shocked the audience. Marilyn found herself in the old familiar cycle of amphetamines and other uppers every morning in order to face work, and Nebutols and other downers to sleep. Facing the camera every day was as harrowing for her as it had been during her last picture, The Misfits. Each day Marilyn's insecurities grew, and she quickly reverted to the habit established in her recent films, drinking herself almost insensible upon returning home from the set. Paula Strasberg, Marilyn's acting guru, was at her side every day at the studio doing what she could to protect her charge. But it was no good. Studio executives viewed the daily rushes in growing alarm. They had no choice, however, but to bring the picture in as expeditiously as possible, hoping to salvage what they could at the box office. "My God," Marilyn told Paula on the last day of work on the set, "I'm getting old. I killed every one of the still shots. The lines on my face are getting so deep." "It's all right, darling," Paula comforted in her curious European accent. "You're an actress. The lines to worry about are in the script, not in your pretty face." "What am I going to do?" How many 36-year-old sex symbols are there anyhow? They keep signing new girls and they're giving them the same build-up as they gave me, and they're so young. Not to worry, darling. There's only one Marilyn. Well, I'm not so sure. Look at me. Marilyn peered into her dressing-room mirror. The heavy eyeshadow, thick pancake, and glistening lipstick failed to conceal the toll the drugs and alcohol were taking. Her face was puffy and sallow. George has even cut my close-ups. Something's Got to Give was released in the spring of 1963 after many delays and changes in the script and the padding of Dean Martin's role. Marilyn, although given top billing, appeared in surprisingly few scenes. The critics cruelly commented on her haggard appearance and listless performance. The picture failed spectacularly, and 20th Century Fox would not recoup its negative costs. Marilyn's unreliability and sudden physical debilitation combined to convince executives at Hollywood's major studios that her career was finished. She had cost 20th Century Fox $5 million. MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Columbia were not about to gamble on the fading star. Marilyn, infuriated by reaction to the picture, became more reclusive. She manipulated friends to contact discredited doctors who kept her supplied with drugs. Her agents beseeched her in vain to accept inferior scripts from marginal producers. As her physical and emotional condition continued to deteriorate, Ralph Greenson pleaded with the actress to return to the hospital for treatment. "We cannot force you," the psychiatrist told her late in the summer, "but you are in danger of another overdose. You must get treatment or you will die." Marilyn was unresponsive. She lost track of the days, then weeks, lost in a haze of drugs. For the first time in her life, she became indifferent to her appearance, moving around her home trance-like in a bathrobe. She slept during the day, vacantly watching television far into the night. Eunice Murray was unable to do more than prepare her meals and answer the telephone, telling callers that the actress was out of the city. Marilyn awoke late one chilly October night after sleeping 32 hours. Disoriented, she staggered from her bed and walked unsteadily into the kitchen to take a bottle of Dom Perignon from the refrigerator. Unaccountably, her head was clearer than it had been in many weeks. She tuned the set to Channel 4. Johnny Carson swam into focus sitting behind his desk on The Tonight Show. "What was it like playing a love scene with Marilyn Monroe?" Carson asked his guest. The camera panned to Dean Martin, slouching in a chair beside Johnny's desk. Martin exhaled a cloud of cigarette smoke. "Terrific," he replied easily. "She's the most beautiful dame in the world. In some ways, she's like a little kid." Carson cocked his head and said, "Well, some kid. Did you get to know her very well?" "Nah," Martin answered. "But she did tell me she wanted a child of her own someday. That was kind of touching." Martin's offhand remark electrified Marilyn. Somewhere within the actress an alarm bell sounded. Even in the aftermath of her hangover, she felt a tingle of life, a vague remembrance of a long-cherished dream. Marilyn rose, turned off the television set, and returned to her bedroom and sat on the edge of the rumpled bed. She picked up her small personal telephone book, found the New York number she was looking for, and dialed. The telephone was picked up on the fourth ring. Joe DiMaggio answered with a sleepy, laconic, "Hello." "Joe?" He recognized her voice at once. "Marilyn, it's been a long, long time. Are you all right?" "Oh, Joe, I need your help." There was a pause and a quiet laugh. "You always say that when you call, and it's always in the middle of the night. What time is it?" "I don't know. I'm sorry, but I do need you, Joe." "What can I do for you this time, baby?" I have to get out of Southern California, Joe. I have to get away from the movies and these horrible people out here. And I'm afraid of losing my mind. Now, come on, baby. You're just having one of your bad nights. You'll be... No, I mean it this time. I don't want to be a star anymore. Honest, I don't want to act anymore, Joe. I want a family. Yeah, we used to talk about having kids, remember? You and Joe Jr. are the nearest thing I have to a family. There isn't even a man in my life. Joe was silent. I don't mean you and I should... I don't mean us together. I really do want a child. A real home and everything. Somebody real. Some place where I can be me. Marilyn, it's late. Can we talk tomorrow? Oh, Joe, please. I want to stop being Marilyn Monroe. There is no Marilyn left. I want to be Norma Jean again. I swear to God I do. You know, they're letting unmarried women adopt children now. I could go to some other city. I could change my name. I'm serious, Joe. Joe said nothing. Marilyn interpreted his silence as reproach. I haven't had a drink in a couple of days, she went on, her voice rising near hysteria. And I haven't even taken a pill. Please, Joe, listen to me. I'm alone and I'm dying. I know I am. Honey, take it easy. Are you serious? Do you mean what you're saying? Oh, yes, please help me. 5 weeks after her conversation with DiMaggio, Marilyn walked unrecognized through the Columbus, Ohio airport. Her hair was tinted dark brown, several shades deeper than her own natural color. She wore slacks, a shapeless sweater, and a bulky coat that failed to conceal the fact that the woman beneath was clearly overweight. Her face bore little makeup. Marilyn shivered as she stepped out in the brisk Midwestern weather to hail a taxi. She told the driver to take her to the Neal House Hotel in the center of the city facing the Ohio State Capitol building. She registered as Norma Johnson. Safely in her own room, she asked the hotel operator to connect her with the room of another guest. I'm here. In a few minutes, she opened the door to welcome Joe DiMaggio, who took her in his arms and kissed her forehead. Oh, Joe, thank you. Thank you. Joe found it difficult to speak. He would not have recognized his former wife had he passed her on the street. Marilyn looked bloated, exhausted, and astoundingly frumpy. He was unable to hide his surprised reaction. Nobody on the plane recognized me, she said, touching her hair self-consciously with her hand. I flew tourist. I look terrible, I know. Oh, no, baby, you just look different. You even sound different. Well, I am. I really am. I don't have to look in mirrors anymore and worry if there's a hair out of place. And you look wonderful. Why, the gray in your hair is really attractive. It's distinguished. Old ball players never die. They just gray away. Say, Joe, did you get the house? My friend Bill Murphy has taken care of just about everything. He found a small rental out in Upper Arlington. I didn't tell him who the house was for, but it's all settled. When can I see it? Tomorrow. How about the adoption agency? Joe sighed. That's going to take some time. His wife Gloria works with some people at a private foundling home. They're trying to work things out. Marilyn touched the sleeve of Joe's blue pinstriped suit. You're wonderful to do all this for me, Joe. God, I wish I had known what I was doing when we were married. Her words made DiMaggio uncomfortable. Water over the dam, baby. Hey, Joe? Uh-huh. I haven't had a drink or a pill in more than a month. It's been awful. Cold turkey, boy, my nerves are gone. It almost killed me flying here alone like this, but I made it. Does anyone know where you are? No, not a soul. I gave Mrs. Merrier notice. I just left the house as it was and only brought 2 suitcases. Did you tell your agents? Nobody. DiMaggio walked to the window to look out at the state capitol lawn and the changing leaves of the trees. All hell is going to break loose in the press when they find out Marilyn Monroe's missing, he said. She's dead, Joe. She didn't want to live anymore. I don't miss her. Joe was uncomfortable again. He changed the subject. You're going to be lonely here. You don't know a soul. I'll make it work. You'll see. Once I get the baby, it'll be all right. Joe explained as he had on the telephone 10 days earlier. The adoption would not be legal. He was careful not to use the term black market baby. Gloria Murphy's association with a home for unwed mothers would enable Marilyn to pay for the natural mother's medical, prenatal, and delivery care in exchange for the child. There would be no official documents or records. Should there be any inquiries, Norma Johnson was a widow who gave birth to her child after her husband's death in a car accident. I understand, Marilyn said, nodding thoughtfully. I told the Murphys you were a widow from Chicago and that you were moving here. But, Marilyn, are you positive this is what you want? Marilyn's eyes glistened with tears. I've never been so sure of anything in my life. What about finances? We went over all of that, Joe. I cleaned out my safe deposit boxes and got cashier's check from my savings accounts. God, it was complicated. I never did stuff like this before. Joe grinned and turned to face his ex-wife. Oh, welcome to the real world. You're learning how the other half lives. Well, it's sort of fun, but it's scary, too. I won't be able to come here often, Joe said softly. People still recognize this old ball player, and it could tip off the press. Marilyn was pensive. But they don't even know I've disappeared yet. Don't worry. They will. The December 6th front page banner headline of the Los Angeles Times ran for 8 columns in black block letters. Marilyn Monroe disappears. The wire services picked up the story, which blossomed into print throughout the United States and in most cities of the world. The mysterious disappearance of the actress electrified the media. Rumors of foul play, suicide, and kidnapping were printed and broadcast. Marilyn Monroe's disappearance was second only to the assassination of John F. Kennedy as the story of the year for 1963. Old friends, co-stars, and associates were questioned by the police. Many gave interviews speculating on the fate of Marilyn Monroe. Ralph Greenson appeared on national television, ending his interview with an appeal to Marilyn to reveal her whereabouts. Many cynics suspected a publicity stunt. The Los Angeles Police Department issued a search warrant to enter her home. They reported the premises looked as though the actress had left for the day and would return any minute. Her automobile was in the garage. The post office revealed that Marilyn had asked that her mail be stopped with no forwarding address. Utility companies and the telephone company had been asked to discontinue service. Her agents were dumbfounded, as was Pat Newcomb. Marilyn Monroe, the world's premier glamour girl, had disappeared without a trace. It was the stuff of novels and motion pictures. A New York publisher announced that Norman Mailer would write a biography of the actress. 20th Century Fox said they would re-release Something's Gotta Give. Chief Thomas Parker of the Los Angeles Police Department assigned a special squad of detectives to comb the city for Marilyn's body. False Marilyn sighting reports came from all over the world. President Lyndon Johnson gave the Federal Bureau of Investigation permission to enter the case. Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller were questioned but were unable to help authorities in their search for leads in the mystery. Marilyn Monroe had vanished as if she had never existed. The Fieldstone and Frame house on Coventry Road in Upper Arlington was comfortably furnished and cozy, an inconspicuous dwelling in the upper-middle-class community. It was Christmas Day, 1963. Marilyn was dressed in powder blue pants, a knobby white wool sweater, and comfortable low-heeled shoes. She paced through the living room with its maple tables and overstuffed matching chairs that sat facing each other on either side of the fireplace, where a cheery fire crackled. She walked into the kitchen, which she had made gleam, to open the refrigerator for the 8th time to reassure herself it remained stocked with the proper baby formula. A sideboard held 24 glass nursing bottles and nipples beside a shining new sterilizer. Then she went upstairs to her own bedroom, approving its neat and spare appearance. She opened her closet door to hang up the robe she had discarded on the bed earlier. It amused her to see how few clothes she had needed in the past month: earth-toned dresses and jackets, plain pants, and half a dozen pairs of shoes. It was no longer necessary for her to spend hours worrying about her wardrobe. She relied on her own essentially simple tastes, choosing conservative fabrics and styles, nothing that would draw attention. She walked almost timidly into the nursery with its pink and blue decor. It's perfect, she thought. She had taken loving pains to buy every item in the room. The flounce around the crib was bright and colorful. She had bought prints of clowns and puppies and kittens for the walls. There was a mobile, too, with multicolored plastic birds twirling lazily beside the crib. A bassinet stood in one corner and a padded rocking chair in another. A changing table was stacked with a generous stock of diapers. This is where my baby will live, Marilyn thought. She glanced into the only mirror in the room. Oh, she groaned. God, you have gained weight, Norma Jean. Her hair was darker by a tone since her arrival in Columbus more than 7 weeks earlier. Her hips were broader, her breasts heavier, and there was no denying the beginnings of what would become a substantial double chin. But her skin was pink and glowing. She had not had a drop of alcohol nor taken drugs for almost 2 months. Food, not chemicals, had become her refuge. Anyone searching her face for a trace of Marilyn Monroe would have discovered that she was indeed the actress. But the absence of makeup, the darkened hair and brows, the added weight and monotone voice served to conceal the woman who had been the star that spring in Something's Got to Give. The uproar over her disappearance had abated somewhat, with the investigation diminishing as the holiday season approached. Marilyn dispassionately followed the story in the Columbus Dispatch and on the television news shows. It was as if she were hearing about a woman she never knew. Her neighbors paid her little heed. At the Upper Arlington Shopping Center, the pretty but overweight newcomer was accepted just as another housewife. It pleased Marilyn that she did not draw a second glance from the other shoppers. In the evenings, she contented herself watching TV, reading light fiction, and anticipating the first glimpse of her child. Today was Christmas, after all. Gloria Murphy would be bringing the baby, a week-old girl, at any moment.
His name is Omran Daknesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust of a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Omran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Omran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Omran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Omran is recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
The images shocked the world. Relentless bombings. Stunned survivors.
Apa yang ada?